What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 371 of the podcast. Today we have a dear friend of mine, Tara-Nicholle Kirke, with us. And this is a really dynamic woman. I'd love to tell you this woman does just one thing. She does not. But what we honed in on today, what we really focused on was, different attitudes about liberation, about prosperity, about how it is that you conduct yourself, you in your life, how you face and deal with and move through and confront your fears. Tara is someone, we have such a fun story about how we met, and we share it right in the beginning of the podcast. But she's someone who she's deeply spiritual, but she's deeply practical. And that's my favorite combination. And just the way she conducts her life, the way she embodies her success, the way she writes, the way she speaks, her context for so many different things is just so inspiring, but also, in my experience, so easy to execute. Like, it's motivational in the sense that you hear it and you're like, oh, it's really not that hard, even though it might be challenging. You know how sometimes people say simple but not easy? I find Tara's deep and very, very wise approach to so many things that we talk about on the podcast all the time to be just that, simple but not easy. So if you're willing to step up and listen and implement and integrate some of the things she talks about here, I mean, you could just amplify your success in so many areas of your life relatively quickly. So I hope you enjoy this episode. The show notes are at untameyourself.com/371. And that's it. Share it up. Use it as a conversation piece with friends, family, other people in your life. Connect with Tara. And let's get into the show. Okay, we're recording. You say Tara or Tara? I don't think I've ever.
Tara. I say Tara.
I thought so. That's how I naturally say your name. I don't think I've ever actually had to say it out loud to you before.
Yeah. And I changed my name, right? So it's Tara-Nicholle Kirke.
Which I love.
That's it.
And I love the backstory. Everyone listening, welcome to my friend, Tara-Nicholle Kirke, who I need to tell them how we met.
Yes.
Really quickly.
Yes.
I had just moved to Oakland and I was nursing a broken heart because I had ended a relationship with a man in Los Angeles who had like a little 2-year-old, and I loved that baby. I loved the baby more than I loved him, if I'm really honest. And so I'm sitting on this bench, and you know what? I don't know if I told you this. I had bought some plants from some people on Facebook Marketplace, and my GPS was sending me back to where I lived. But at the light, I saw a sign for a park I hadn't been to, the Temescal Park, right?
Yes.
And it was left. So I'm in like the left lane to turn left to go home. But I see the sign and I'm like, oh, there's a park. Woo! Pull a little across the lane. My East Coast driving skills, right? So I'm like, let me go to this park real quick. So I go to this park and I get there and the water, there's like algae, like the pond is kind of gross, but I'm like, whatever. And I find this bench to sit on, which is actually a tree. And I'm like, yes, I need to go put my ass on that tree. And the minute I sit down, I see this little kid come bounding around a corner. And the energy was similar to the baby that I had just loved so much. And I'm sitting there and I just start crying. And like the moment I started crying, this child makes a beeline for me. And I'm like, God, you stop it right now. And so this child comes running up to me, and it was London, and London is Tara's. And I don't know, your daughter.
Yep.
And so London comes up and she starts like crawling up, like basically, and it's, it's COVID time. So I have a mask on and I'm real boundaried and we're in the Bay Area. So I'm like looking at you and I'm like, is this okay? Like I got my mask on and you're like, it's fine. But also Tara is wrangling London, the dog, and a scooter.
Trying to.
And then so Tara's like, what's your name? And so I hung out with London for a little while. And then, you were trying to like make your way back to the car. And I'm like, can I carry something? Like, oh, why don't I walk with you? And you were like, sure. So then we're talking, London falls, like, here, you hold the dog. Like it was instant. Like, I got you. What do you need? Yeah. I love this person. I love this one. But then here's what's funny. We didn't like fully introduce ourselves. We didn't like exchange numbers or anything. The next day, I'm talking to my friend Monisha, who's been on the podcast a couple of years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, you'll never guess what happened. This little kid totally reminded me of this baby that I love. And Monisha's like, I know London. Tara is a close friend of mine. And I was like, get the fuck out of here, because I was actually sad. I was like, well, what a beautiful moment. And I didn't feel like I needed to be like, hey, should we be friends? And I didn't need to. It was so like we were meant to be in each other's lives. And then what was so funny is we hadn't really like made effort to hang out, although and we would just bump into each other at the farmer's market like every couple of weeks. And I was like, I don't need to even call her. I just summon her with my heart. And there she is.
And here we are. I mean, it was such a funny experience because, you know, London, having London, being London's steward,
Yes.
being a steward of this little being, big being.
I was going to say, there's nothing little about stature, but there is nothing little about London.
Yeah. During COVID has been such a wild blessing, literally wild and blessing, because like she doesn't know what's your rules for social blah blah, and I have like made like London has not heard the word COVID, does not know what this is. I have not told her anything about this.
Yes,
she knows we're supposed to wear masks, you know, she has to wear a mask at daycare, she knows a couple things, but I haven't been that parent who's like, you gotta like back off and don't talk to whatever. So the whole time we would go out to Lake Temescal, and she would randomly just like walk up to people and be like, hi, what's your name? What's your dad's name? What's your dog's name? You don't have a dog? Why don't you have a dog? Like, what, like, you know, she'd be like all in their business. And usually I was like, okay, let's come on, like, let's keep it moving. And that particular time, I felt like she was so in your space. And I was like, oh gosh. And then she wouldn't leave.
She wouldn't leave. That was the other, she wouldn't leave.
She was like, so London kind of picks people.
Yeah.
And London has impeccable judgment about people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's totally wild. And I remember like telling my friends, oh my gosh, we had this experience, but it was like really sweet. And then this like lady walks into our car and I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually was helpful because I don't know how I was going to get London to leave. Like, I'm glad she did.
Right, she had to like go to the bathroom. There was so many things happening.
So much stuff. Then I get a call from Monisha, who's like, hey, did you meet a lady named Elizabeth at Lake Temescal? And I'm like, yeah, actually, she's this like really cool chick. She was new to town. She's like, yeah, I know. she's my friend. She's like, here. So cut to a few months later, I was sharing with you when we were talking before about going to Mexico. So I was in Mexico visiting and just like learning about this particular area I was in the Yucatan, learning about their like what their indigenous cultures were about and what they did and what was important there. And it was a sweat lodge. A lot of their sacred ritual culture was around sweat lodges. And they called their sweat lodges Temescals.
No way.
It is like where the word Temescal, which is all over Oakland, that lake is called Temescal, the neighborhood that you lived in.
That's where I live. Yeah.
That comes from that.
Wow.
They actually understood that was like a big practice of the indigenous peoples here. So Temescal, but with a Z instead of with an S.
Okay.
S is the Anglo version.
Yeah.
How's that for a full circle?
Amazing. So amazing. So you and I were catching up before I hit record and we started talking about fear and then we were like, damn it, we got to hit the record button. Yes. So what I was sharing with Tara, everybody listening, and some of you know this about me, especially if you're in the Embodied Living Center, is I call myself a freak in no kind of derogatory way, just as like being an outlier. I don't have the experience of fear that a lot of people have. Like, I don't get stuck up in fear. Like the way I'm built, I just very naturally, I'm like, oh, that's terrifying. I should probably lean into it.
That part.
Which I don't think that's always appropriate for everybody. But for me, it's always like, ooh, if I'm really scared of that, I probably need to go do it. Or if there's something I'm really inspired to do and it brings up some fear, I'm like, it's cool. Hi, fear. You're just going to come with me because we're doing this. Like, to be able to see it, look at it, face it, and like go forward anyway is kind of just literally how I've always been. And I know that is not most people's relationship to me.
Definitely not. But I think I have a similar either wiring or training. I think actually early in my life, I just didn't feel, and I still don't, I don't feel fear about the same things that other people do.
Yes.
But I do think that like over a lifetime, and I noticed actually like in the last year or so, especially like as you experience trauma, and you maybe work on a bunch of your trauma, but then there's new trauma
Yes.
that's happening, right? Like I definitely saw where there were areas I had been much more cautious than I would have been
Yes.
earlier in my life that I think was like trauma-based fear. But I'm fortunate to have had like teachers since before I was born, including Dave Rico, whose book you were about to share something about before we were like, let's hit record. We're going to like capture this conversation.
Get this now.
But Dave Rico gave me the frame that all fear is unintegrated excitement. And that the only way to integrate it is to wholeheartedly engage with whatever the subject of that fear is. So I think like for me early in life, other people were afraid where I probably, for me, where I maybe should have been, but wasn't. And that was always a signal to me, like, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go check that. I'm going to go do that. And I think now I can integrate all of those pieces and hold them all within me.
Totally. My family is very fearful. Like whenever you bring something up to them, they will start to list out all the reasons why we should be worried about it, afraid of it, like things we need to look out for, cautions, all that stuff.
I call it love through worrying, love by worrying.
Totally. And I'm like, these people really love the shit out of me, but I just can't with that stuff. And I'm like, that's cool, but here I go. And I've trained my mom, because my mom's the big worrier, for years. I trained my mom as soon as I started to get more into energy work. I did my first Reiki attunement, and I was just studying energy much more deeply. And I was like, here's the thing. Worrying is like praying for what you don't want. I'm like, so whenever you're afraid for me, whenever you're worrying about me, please say a prayer instead. I'm like, I do not need you surrounding me with the energy of your fear and your worry, but please pray. Send the angels. Just see me like enveloped in this like whatever color light. Send love. Ask God. Ask Pop to protect me.
Don't speak and don't keep speaking the worries. They are curses. We are spellcasters. Our words do matter, right? So what's funny is like, so now that I've got London, I've been noticing like I think London has been such a teacher for me in like 50 ways, including that I had kids out of my house for like 10 years before London came to me. And many of the people that I teach are moms, like with young kids in home right now. So it was like really helpful for me to like see what their experience of trying to do the ritual that I was teaching them to do or whatever is like when you have little kids at home. And it was also fascinating to see how immediately like this culture's collective unconscious shadows around like maternal guilt start to pop up. Like this child was in my custody roughly like 36 hours before I started feeling guilty. And I was like, but for real, Tara? Because like, you can't even possibly have negatively impacted her in any way in this short period of time. So that's fascinating.
Yes.
Right. And the fear for your children. And so like, I have a thing, and I was telling a friend about it. I have a thing where if I have an unbidden fear thought about London pop to mind, I have a discipline around immediately like imaging some like the most radically liberated, joyful image of her as an adult that I can come up with.
I love that.
Right? And my friend was like, she doesn't have children, but she's like very, very thoughtful about parenting related issues as part of her work. And she was like, well, it's not fair for us to impose our like expectations for our children on them. And I'm like, oh yeah, but this isn't even about that. This isn't even for her. This is like, and I'm like good at it's like a random lecture in my mind. So sometimes it's like her as an adult surfing on the water in the waves. Sometimes it's her as an adult as like the co-president of a film studio. Right. Sometimes it's like her as an adult, you know what I mean? Like it's all these different things. I don't care what it is, what the specific of it doesn't matter, just so long as it's her well and radically liberated, just doing whatever she feels like doing that lights her up and makes her feel good, to sort of cancel out. And we have thought habits. It is our responsibility to train them, even if the unfortunate events or sometimes insidious events that trained the negative thought, the fear thought, are not our fault, or maybe we even came from like toxic culture, trauma, whatever. it's only us who can like kind of take control and like start to train, the opposite thought habit. So that's what I do.
So I love this. And I know that some people are going to hear that and be like, well, isn't that a spiritual bypass? Can you please speak to why it's not?
I mean, I cannot be victim to my own thoughts. I have to seize responsibility for it. I also am a deep, 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 deep down believer in the shadowiest of the shadow work. Yeah. You got to go there. So what I think is spiritual bypassing is when you hear I call it the love and light brigade. Yes. When you hear the love and light brigade, be like, you have to control your thoughts. You can only you always have to, you create your reality by the thoughts that you think. You don't try to get to the bottom of your negative thoughts. You can't get to the bottom. You kind of can. I think you can. I think you actually need to. Like there is a part, and I lived like that for a long time just because it's my wiring it's all of our wiring to want to feel good. Yes. It was also my wiring as like a young person. Several things. One is like the trauma I experienced in my very early life was so severe that I needed to dissociation was actually a real ass survival strategy for real. And like for survival's sake, that's what I did. And that's what I needed to do. And while my children were that young, that's just what I needed to do. And then there comes a time in your life where you will always, whatever is in your shadows, meaning whatever are the subjects and the thoughts you most avoid will be the most active shit in your life. You will continue, it will you can't get away from it. You will continue to remarry the guy that's just like the parent that abused you. It is just that. And so when you hear on these audios of these the love and light only folk, the students being like, but I have the fear and I can't seem to get around it. And they're just like, well, you can't get to the bottom of it. Why do you, just think a better thought. Just think a better thought. Sometimes you can't. Yes. Sometimes you can't. You know what I mean? Especially if it's rooted in trauma. And sometimes you may not even remember the trauma in which it is rooted. And maybe you'll never remember. You don't even have to remember it to do the work on it. Yeah. So I had to go there. I had to grieve what little Tara lost. I had to mourn for young, and I mean literally actual young child Tara. I had to broker agreements and negotiate truces, negotiate support treaties between grown-ass 45-year-old Tara and 7-year-old Tara. Yeah. I had to speak the freaking truth about and to myself and about myself. I had to including the truth. My parents are both alive right now today and well and in my life, and they were wonderful and they were abusive and they were brilliant and they were fucking nuts. And all of that shit is true. So spiritual bypassing doesn't do that, right? Spiritual bypassing is trial only love and light. So this is a little more about it's all a, what's the right word? It's a comprehensive, love.
Well, you said discipline earlier, and I feel like this is a discipline. You need discipline for it, and it is a discipline. And that's actually something that I've been working with a lot lately because I've had some really great humbling things in the last 6 months come up and been okay, great. I'm going to need to change. And I know you do a lot with behavior change and habit change and stuff like that. And I want to talk about that. I got to shift some habits. I got to shift some behaviors. Being really isolated during the pandemic was it got heavy for me. And I was depressed for I think the first time in my life, other than I've been through breakups and stuff where I've been grieving, and there's a depression that comes with grieving, but that's different. I was kind of in it in a way I never had been before, where I could string days together and wake up feeling like shit. And I've never had that experience before. I know some people listening are welcome to my life, bitch, So, and what I love about that is sometimes, just as a sidebar, I feel like life brings me through experiences so I can have so much more compassion and understanding. Oh my gosh. I would have had compassion anyway, but when you experience something, you have a different access to deeper compassion. So I get that on a level I never got it before. Yeah. And but damn, like super humbling. But, being here, even just being in Miami, like there's a reason I was called here. And one of them is like the environment holds me here. I don't have to be isolated here the way I was there. And it's like, okay, so now I have access to things and I'm looking around like, I gotta make some changes.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot is about habit because we get into habits pretty easily. There's always a payoff to our habits, like even the ones that we really want to break. There's always a payoff. So I find it to be like helpful. I find just actually awareness of what our habits actually are is hugely helpful because so often we're just kind of on autopilot with respect to them. But then, I'm also like, I think like every day of life it's like church through the lens of just like, there's so many things are asking us to deem them sacred and to experience them as sacred. And we get to do that. And so it's funny that some of the things that my friends know that I've been doing for 20 years every day or whatever, 11 years every day, they think of as habit and I think of it as ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, and the difference is the sacred part. The difference is because it does get to be like autopilot. Whereas ritual is like sacred every time you do it.
Okay. I love this. You're giving me an aha because one of the things that I've been doing as a ritual
Yes.
is go outside and move my body in the morning.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what I do. It's not like I have to go to the gym. I have to today's yoga, whatever. I'm like, go outside, be in the sun, move your body. Sometimes I'm swimming in the pool. Sometimes I'm going to the beach. Sometimes I'm just going for a walk for a couple of blocks, ride my bike, go to the gym. Like, it doesn't matter. I have to go outside in the morning because it's like my relationship. I'm having a whole love affair with the sky and the sun since I got here. And that's actually what it's about. I need to go and let the sun be on my body and also be moving my body.
And it's like literally nutritional.
Yes.
Right? Like there are chemical reactions happening on your skin and nourishing you that we forget about. Yeah, I love that. And that's not habit. Because like the habit would be if you just go to the gym on autopilot every day and you're in there and you're like, I don't even know how I got here, but I'm here. And that's good. That's good. I don't mean to like slight habits. Good habits are great and important. But the ritual is like, oh, I need to commune with the sun on an everyday basis in a movement kind of way.
Right. It's like
it feels delicious.
But there's the communion, the sacredness. I'm communing with the sun. I'm communing with myself. I'm communing with my soul, hanging out with God, goddess, whatever I believe in. Yeah.
Right. And that's actually how I ask people to think about shifting and changing and transforming their habits. Is like, how can you make the new quote unquote habit you're creating, how can you make it be that delicious to you? How can you make it feel like this woman, Tara Moore, talks about like setting your goals as like gifts. How can you make it feel like a gift you're giving to yourself? Like over and over and over and over. And I'm like big on, I think in our culture's scarcity trance lie.
I like that, calling it a trance. That's real.
It's a freaking trance. And so many people are participating in it that it seems real, but that shit is not true. There is plenty on this planet for every single body that has ever been on this planet and ever will come onto this planet, like period. And it's like but the trance of scarcity creates this like feeling of competition for resources that feeds all the toxic power structure. So like that is beneficial to them to keep that lie going. So in the opposite, and part of breaking that trance of scarcity or waking up from it in our own lives is being very, 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 very lavish with ourselves.
Yes.
Right. Which I think is a lot about I think that's what a lot of what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being lavish with ourselves in all these different ways, including how we move our bodies and how we allow ourselves to move our bodies, including what we put in, on, and around our bodies. Right. Including like including how much we charge if we are in business, including who we do and don't work with, including the time we do or don't give to ourselves.
Yes.
Right.
And others and things and thoughts, all that. Yes. And I love that you use the word lavish. This is one of my favorite freaking words.
The best.
And this is what I love about embodiment and sensuality so much. It's so lavish, but it doesn't have to cost a dime.
Doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. Although cool if it does, but it
Great
doesn't.
there's nothing wrong with that either. But like truly, like the richest moments, the most lavish moments of my life are when I feel like that divine moving through me. And I'm like, oh yes, this is real. We are connected. This mystery is real. I can't explain it to you, but this is the best fucking feeling.
And like not constricting, constraining, restricting how you even allow your own body to like be or move or look or feel. Cause that to me is the most, one of the things I specialize in doing is helping people befriend and transform their inner critic. And like, that sounds like very individual work, but this shit is like activism to me. I believe that the internalized oppression, let's call it that shows up in the form of our individual inner critics is like the single largest oppressive force and most insidious oppressive force on this planet, because it stops people from even moving their own bodies. Yeah. It stops people from even allowing themselves to want what they really want. Like I truly work with women who are like badasses in huge companies who cannot even let themselves voice that they want what they really want. So they keep setting these goals and they're not getting there. And then when I show up, I'm like, hi, it's really apparent to me that you don't even give a shit about that. That ain't even your goal. That's like your grandmama's goal. You don't even need to set that goal.
We need to pause on this for a second because I want people to hear this, because this is also something I've been saying for years. If you are consistently like failing, and I'm putting that in air quotes for anyone who's listening, if you're setting a goal, if you're not hitting it, if you have a dream and it's not coming to fruition, might not be your dream.
Start there.
This might not be an alignment for you.
And like, so it's funny because, people know the Simon Sinek work on starting with your why.
Yes.
Right. And he teaches a lot about like identifying your why as like the way to put motivation behind what you're doing. And I'm like, cool, but also identify your why, because you may not have a why for that goal. It might not be your goal. And like, you may not, so literally I'm like, you may just not give a shit. And
you're like, start with why, so you can actually see if that's even some shit that you want.
Even some shit you want. And like, then you may decide that it's not what you want. And when you get to what your real values really, really are, really, really care about. Like, I know for me, for a long time, I wasn't motivated to make more money because I already live kind of a badass life. I didn't need any more money than I had to live pretty much exactly how I wanted to live.
Yeah.
Right. And then like the baby came and like, I decided I wanted houses in multiple countries. Like, you know what I mean? And I decided I actually am kind of a bougie country club chick. And then I was like, oh, well, that's my motivation. You know what I mean? Mostly so I can spend a ton of time with this like child, helping her learn how to wield her superpowers. Yes. Like there's freedom and stuff. And so that stuff was much more motivating to me than like just some number you set because somebody said you should set. So who cares? Right? Yeah.
Quick break in the show, everybody, to let you know that applications are open for my 2022 Embodiment Specialist training. I am so excited about this training. It is like 7 or 8 years in the making. It is expanded beyond what was Wild Soul Movement teacher training since 2016. And this is really for anybody who feels the pull to graduate from doing basic level self-help, personal development, and spiritual work, and truly embody self-love, healing, and wholeness, so they can live soulful and soul-centered lives that contribute to collective healing and liberation, as well as people who are wanting to really integrate the light and the dark, who place a high value on kindness, generosity, integrity, humility, and reverence, who know that while we receive all kinds of gifts and talents and genius, we are the instruments, not the players. This is for people who want to prioritize embodying their divine nature in order to serve the human experience, as well for those who would like to incorporate embodiment work into their professional lives in some way, shape, or form, or just deepen their own practice. So if you want to learn more about the training, which starts in February 2022, head to untameyourself.com/specialist. There are some dates by which to apply if you need an extended payment plans. We have a couple different extended payment plans, and it's just going to be an incredible, alchemical, transformative experience. It's going to be a small, intimate group because I will also be mentoring and working with everyone one-on-one throughout the 13 months of the training. So again, really deep, really beautiful, really incredible experience. If you are interested, go to untameyourself.com/specialist, and I will be so excited to receive your application if you decide to submit one. I don't know. I don't remember when this interview is going live, but if enrollment is still open, I am running an embodiment specialist training next year. And one of the things that I'm excited about in this training is to help people get through their money shit and their money dramas. Because this for me in a business and, relationship to prosperity capacity, we talked earlier about spiritual bypass and the Love and Light Brigade. And a lot of that is also just like the straight up law of attraction people. That shit fucked me up for a number of years.
Girl. I stop saying these things.
I know. It was bad. But so here's the thing. Once I stopped
the disciplines, without all the other, without all this other stuff,
without the sacredness. It's who did I hear? It was Carolyn Mace recently. She called it, it's like spiritual, not even spiritual materialism, but like spiritual, go shopping with your spiritual list, like here's the spirituality support your material. Like what, I forget exactly how she said it, but it's like, it's really just meant to help you acquire all these material things that like, you don't even know why, like there's no,
which is hard because if you do it the old school way, like the old school, like Florence Scovel Shin kind of way.
Yes. Flow school.
But flow school will have you jack yourself up first if you got shit that needs to get jacked up first. Because she'll be because once you declare divine order is now established in my mind, my body, and my affairs. And I always add, I'm like, in my bank account, and my
yes.
Attendance or whatever's like on my mind right now.
Yes.
My client list, my whatever, right? That's an alignment technology and it works like anything that's not in alignment will get real frictiony and blow up. It may feel like you might have a breakup, you might lose a job, you might, whatever has to happen for divine order to be established will happen. And sometimes the more rapid those quantum leaps that people think they want, you might do better to work on that stuff over some decades because the quantum leaps are not, I've had them at various points. They are painful. Yeah. And that's okay if you're up for it. And you are, if you have one and it's like that, then you are up for it because that's just how it works. But often those eras feel like crisis and feel like loss before they feel like alignment.
Yes. So this is what I'm saying. For the years that I spent being fucked up around the law of attraction, chasing goals that weren't mine, that I thought I should, judging myself for that I really didn't. Once I got in lock with sufficiency and sustainability, what's enough? What's sustainable for me? And what keeps me in alignment? What do I need? I mean, I have a tattoo that says under grace, which is a nod to flow scope.
Yes.
Under grace and perfect way.
Yes. Under grace, overcome seas. I call it the over under blessing. My students are always like, give us the over under blessing because it sounds like gambling or something, right? What's the over under?
Yes.
No, the over under blessing is that avalanches of abundance now begin to flow to you under grace, over calm seas and imperfect waves.
Over calm seas.
Because that's the thing, that shit can get rocky if you don't ask for it that way.
But this is also something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And then of course, so it's been popping up in my Instagram, different people's memes and shit, is that I can be at peace even when things are tumultuous.
Same. I've just had to be, but
yeah.
But comes from those look at my life and are like, whoa. They're like, how are you? It's a discipline and it's just, wiring. Some of us are wired and came here with archetypal strengths to be able to do that. I do think the older I get, I probably get somewhat better at like creating the transitions that I want to create without them always being, I mean, like, I don't know if you ever had a problem with boundaries. I literally was raised in a household where you weren't allowed to have boundaries.
Yes.
Like parents were violating boundaries all the time, all the time, all the time. So then lo and behold, you grow up as an adult who doesn't know how to do boundaries.
Yeah.
And you got to learn that the hard way. And I did. And then when I first learned how to practice boundaries and like tried to practice boundaries, do you remember like there used to be this internet meme with this little tiny, really cute kitty, like slowly patting her way away from like an actual like atom bomb, like explosion, like nuclear mushroom cloud? That was me. I was that kitty. I was like really trying to do the right thing and practice boundaries. And they were the right boundaries to set, but I had no
dropping bombs.
Girl, I was messing people up.
Yeah.
And I had, because I had lacked skill. I didn't have skill. I didn't have practice. I didn't have mastery over those things. And now it's funny because not only do you practice the skills, but you also practice, like now I actually just the other day had a younger woman ask me a question about like a relationship issue. Mm-hmm. And I kind of was like, you know, I have had issues like that before, like 20 years ago. But it's almost like you practice you practice, I call them the magnets, the moats, and the mirrors. Like you practice the moat. You practice, there's like a force field around you where you just don't even get presented with some of that nonsense that you come your way all the time. And you're like, huh, interesting. It's been like 20 years since anybody did. So like, I can't even really tell you what I would do in that situation because I wouldn't be in that situation right now.
Totally.
Be to God, praise and bless.
Yeah.
And so that like all of that happens with like maturity and practicing, you know, your skills and your strategies.
I love that you're saying this and I appreciate it because this is something that I talk about a lot, that time in the field matters. We can all have breakthroughs, but like deep practice and mastery and skill development, which none of those things sound sexy. That's not what anyone wants to hear. The word instant is not baked into any of that. But it is so because there's a couple things that I'm hitting like my decade mark on in 2021 that I'm just like sitting into like, I want to call it like the lusciousness of time in the field.
Yes, time in the field. That's a beautiful phrase. Well, because, you know, the culture is like, it's like a youth promoting culture. And I'm like, that's kind of cute, except you can't have time in the field. And there's just some stuff you cannot practice and get great at when you're 25.
Yeah.
Even when you're 30. Totally. You know what I mean? There's just some stuff that there's some awakening, like in the natural spiritual journey of an awakening human. There are some enlightenments and awakenings that are meant to happen around middle age.
Yep.
That's just like when they happen. And it's like wonderful that that's the divine timing of them, because by then is when you've got some time in the field, to use your phrase, and you've got enough skill to deal with it. Stuff that would have done you in 20 years ago. You're like, nah, I'm here for this. I can do this.
This is something I love children. I don't want my own children, but I love children because even, you know, some people have their kids younger, some people have their kids like later in their 20s, 30s, even into their 40s. But what I notice is there's a certain point in our lives when there's more children in our lives. Yes. More of our friends who are having children have had children, whether they're young or whether they're older. And so factoring in, like even this year when I celebrated my birthday, I did two things. I had the kid-friendly thing and the not kid-friendly thing. Yeah. You know, it was like, all right, happy hour on Tuesday for adults only, beach time on Saturday, bring all the babies, you know? Yeah. And it was like, it's a factor. Like for my 25th birthday, I wasn't factoring in some people might have kids or not. Right. At that time, I didn't have that many people in my life with kids. It wasn't a thing. But now, like I'm the minority, not having children, I'm the minority of the people I know. And I'm like, cool. And I love that. That's great. And like their kids, they made me a little cake. They brought it, like, it was so sweet to have the kids on my birthday at the beach, you know? So, and we learned so much. And my friend, like seeing my friends become parents, like becoming, you know, part of people's villages. There's all, like you called them enlightenments. I like to call some of these things initiations. But like you're saying, like they happen, a lot of it does happen with age.
You know, like in a lifespan.
Yes.
And there's like a natural timing for that ought not to be, we don't have to screw with it. And we don't have to accelerate everything.
No.
Like you don't. So I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I was like 19, I had this very remarkable experience. This woman who was in her 90s put an ad, like a job ad, out at my college. And so she hired me to I typed her words as she spoke her memoirs to me.
Stop it.
No, for like, it took us like 2 years.
Stop.
And then by then she was like a very close, literally I had like a master's degree and was like, okay, I can't keep typing for you. Like, and then she became very good friends with my grandmother. And we actually published this book, and it was the first book I ever worked on.
This is amazing.
Yeah, she was one of the first women pilots licensed to fly in the United
Stop.
States.
I love this so much.
Literally spoke.
You're like, I don't know if I ever told you one of the coolest fucking stories ever.
It was very, very, I mean, I've always had I was raised in a family that had some very countercultural values around like gender, around race, around age, in ways that are like, it was always a good thing to be like a girl and an old lady in my family. Those were always kind of things people revered. So that was like good. But my time with this woman at that age, at 19, where she was telling me, I mean, she had the dipper from the pump, like that her family used to, guys, before there were faucets with the water piped in your house, everybody had a pump in their front yard, and you would have to like pump this pump into the dipper, and then that's how you got water. And she had like the dipper there. She learned how to fly in an open biplane. The plane did not have a top on it. That's how old that experience was. To have the experience of being in this woman's presence while she was so vital. She had lived 100 lives. She had literally outlived 3 husbands. And I was like, what prompted her to hire me, like a 19-year-old? And she was just like, I don't want any more of my friends to die, so I'm making friends with like really young people. She's like, I've outlived so many people. I just need some friends who will not die before me. And I'm pretty sure you won't. So
that's amazing.
Kind of wild, right? Yeah, I mean, other than I had to eat a lot of creamed spinach with her, because that was like her actual jam and was not my jam. It was very, very like formative.
Yeah.
Have to be around someone who was that much older and had this total, still voracious appetite for life and living. You know, and it had looked a lot of different ways in her life. And it kind of felt like nothing, there's that Rilke quote, nothing is final. What is it? Beauty and terror. Feel everything, beauty and terror, just keep going. Nothing is final. Being with her felt like nothing is final. You know, not the wonderful things, not the everything is a season. And I feel like I had the gift of getting that like super early in life in a very visceral, like knowing way.
That's amazing.
And it changed my sense on aging forever. I kind of just was like, it was like probably the beginning of my trances being shattered, because I was like, oh, this is hilarious. These people think it's bad to get older. They have no idea.
I've always loved getting older because I love getting wiser. I'm like,
and also I do think I get cuter. Don't you think you get cuter? I think I get cuter.
To be quite honest. I mean, I just think there's so much, and you know, I've always gravitated towards older people. I've always had older friends, and I've appreciated their wisdom and their presence in my life so much. I'm like, yo, we're missing out. We're missing out by putting people out to pasture.
We're totally missing out. And like,
missing out.
I think about that experience all the time. I'm so appreciative of having had that at that age, because it meant that when I was like turning 30, I literally knew people who were turning 30 who were like, oh, I'm getting so old. And I was like, we're
so young.
you will wish that you had the moment that you wasted thinking that thought back.
Even right now, so this is funny. I just turned 38. And honestly, I'm like, how am I still not 40?
Okay, so I will tell you, I had this experience with my therapist, not like maybe 2 therapists ago, where she was like, why do you keep saying you're older than you are? Because I was at the time, probably I was about your age at the time. And I kept saying, I'm 40, you know, I'm a 40-year-old, I'm a grown woman. I'm a 40-year-old woman. And she'd be like, but are you 40? And I'd be like, well, but I'm 38. And she'd be like, but that's not 40. And I'd be like, oh, that's true. And so just the other day, the doctor asked me how old I was, and I said 47. And she was like, but not really. You're actually 45. So why? And I was like, well, then why did you ask me if you knew? You got the paper. That was my answer. You've got the paper.
You got the paper. Yeah. I mean, because so many of my friends have crossed into their 40s now, and I'm loving it. And I'm watching them like blossom in their 40s. Fucking blossom. And I'm like, I'm still in my damn 30s.
I know. That just means it's going to be extra lit.
I can't wait. I'm like, already, I went to the best. I think you commented on it on Instagram. My friend Trudy's, she might have actually, her podcast might be up the week or two before yours. I went to her 40th birthday party just a couple of days ago.
That looked jubilant.
It was jubilant. It was so fun. I was like, I got 2 years to plan my 40th birthday bash in Miami. You're all invited.
Okay. Shall we talk about my 40th birthday party? I mean, I don't think we've ever.
But there's actually one more thing. I know time is running out a little. I want to hear about your 40th birthday party. Just tell me later. But the thing I really want to make sure that we talk about before our time runs out is, so one of the things that I hate, abhor about social media is the way words that have deep, important meaning and value get diluted and polluted. And one of those words is sovereignty. And that is one of your jams.
That's my jam.
People are really weaponizing the word sovereignty these days. And I hate it. So I want to talk about it in your context.
Sovereignty. That's interesting. I don't pay attention to social media as much as I should, so I'm curious as to what.
I don't think you should.
Yeah, it's sovereign. That's sovereignty. That's a sovereignty decision.
Well, let me. I'll fill you in on the context for that then, and also for anyone listening in case you don't have it either. A lot of people are taking the word sovereignty to basically champion radical individualism. Rather than, because sovereignty to me, and again, I cannot wait to hear how you want to like define it or share, is I'm sovereign, but part of that is knowing that we're all interconnected.
Well, sovereignty. Okay. So I study the archetypes, and work with the archetypes a lot. And in my own archetypes, ruler or queen is very dominant in the archetype. And so when I first began to study them, I started to be like, okay, what is that? But what does that mean? Like, and I initially was studying them in the context of like business and money. So that means it means like I had a shadow around I call it, I do it myself syndrome. I'll do it myself. I'll just do it myself. I'll do it myself syndrome.
Yes.
Right. But rulers don't do it themselves. A ruler builds an empire, okay, without swinging the hammer. Like they're not doing every single hard piece of work themselves. Instead, a ruler like inspires and attracts all the right people to do their genius piece to build this empire. And my kind of ruler that I wanted to be was one that would build an empire for the benefit of all. Right. So as I started to, understand and study the archetypes, part of what that required was for me to I have like a Jungian point of view or set of practices, I should say. So I do study like the rulers and queens of like myth and folklore and legend. And I was kind of dismayed at what I found. There ain't that many lovable queens who weren't exiled or beheaded or dispossessed of their land, who weren't betrayed by the jokers in their court. And, it's not a great look. Right. And one thing that I had to go back. I had to go far back. And so I kept going back until I could get until I got to like the Egyptian goddesses like Hathor and Net, right? Who still were dreaded on some levels because of the tremendous power they wielded, but also were beloved for like giving life and being like willing to like, Net and Hathor have a bit of Kali-esque story to them, where they're willing to like destroy kind of whatever needs to be destroyed so that the more beautiful thing can be born that wants to be born. Sovereignty, in my way of thinking, involves both like envisioning and creating not even only businesses, but empires that benefit all by flowing divine order, right? Like, and I'm sure, and that's not literally in the definition of sovereignty. That's just in my definition of sovereignty. Like, to be a sovereign in the way I think about it does mean that you have to be in this world, but not of it. And in fact, like the world that you are of is a world of divine order, so that the things that you create, it's a life of meaning. It's a life devoted to higher ideals. When I said, the word values gets diluted and polluted, you said the word values just used so willy-nilly. No, really, like, what matters to you? My newsletter this morning was like, what do you worship really?
Yeah.
What are you really putting your time to? What are you really spending the precious moments of breath of your life talking about? What do you really stand for? And so that's in my value system, sovereignty does include, it's probably a little countercultural, probably a little bit contrarian in a way that I do think people may jive with people's like individualism,
Yeah.
but it's like grounded and rooted in divine order. Like, what is some things are right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like about standing for that. And it's about being okay with like, that means your decisions are not made based on status. They are not necessarily made based on money. They are made based on like benefit of all, divine order. And you, as sovereign of you, have to be able to build the ritual and the commitment to hearing and adhering to your inner guidance about what that is, because it's not you cannot get direction from, you're not going to get it on Facebook.
Listen, I will tell you something really quickly. I had an experience last year with a person who I was really close with, and I listened to their advice over what my own intuition was telling me. And then another person came into my life this year who, how some people, the way I experience people's energy is some people are like the same texture.
Interesting. Yes. Yes. I know what you mean.
And so this other person, I was like, God, she reminds me so much of this first person. And I did it again. Common denominator is me. I took her advice on something over following my own because I was tired. High pandemic. This was like, again, like 6 months ago, around that time when I was just like in the dumps. And it led me down a path that I ended up getting really hurt. And there was the same experience, like almost the same exact experience, context, almost everything with this other person last year. And even the timeline on it was like I was like, wild. Are you going to get the lesson, bitch? And I was like, how fascinating. And that was really the lesson. It was like, literally stop asking other people. But these were like, it wasn't like I was like polling my friends. It was like I very specifically went to someone who had the skill set, who isn't intuitive, who, this is what they do. Like they're mystics, our values are aligned, all this stuff. And it was like, still, but let your own soul be louder.
That has to be it's the only way.
Yeah.
It has to be the thing that got, so it's like, it doesn't mean it's wrong to ask, especially someone that's like learned or has expertise, but you have to like, ultimately the buck stops with you and your inner, you and that shackles on, shackles off feeling inside you.
Yeah.
Only. And that's like, I think like it's probably a sign that you normally don't do that these experiences are so isolated and so painful, right? Because you're like, this is not how things normally are. But I end up like, I meet with people and talk to people who are like, they're just not even clear on what their own purpose is or what they're about. And I'm kind of like, you're inner guidance is pretty much always clear. So, but many of us have the practice of overruling it in favor of what someone louder or someone else is saying. And if you do that enough, it just feels like unclarity is how you're.
Well, that becomes habitual.
Exactly. And it is habit. And it is a thing that we tend to fall into more when we are like energy drained or depleted. Yeah, which is why it's so important to take lavish self-care. So that's not your chronic state of being.
Totally. There was something else you just said that I wanted to come back to. And taking the time to listen, right?
Within.
Yes, right? The guidance, like you're saying, it's always there. So if you're like, I'm not clear, it's because you're so busy thinking, I'm not clear. You're literally not even listening. You're not checking.
And the rush, like, because this is a culture that's like always advocating, accelerating, whatever I should be doing. So people do not feel like it's the whole like work and worth conflation.
Yes.
Like, I got to be doing something. I should be making it happen. Sometimes what you should be doing is sitting in a still room.
That is doing. That is an activity. That is an action.
That is an activity. Sometimes I'll just write at the top of my journal page, like, infinite spirit, show me the way.
Yes.
And like, I'll just keep journaling, and like maybe an hour later, it might be a week later, it might be a year later. But like, you got it. That's flowing divine order, is like letting things take the time that they take, letting things line up and light up.
That's right. Oh my God. I love it so much. I love you. I miss you. I miss London. Everyone listening, Tara's website is soultour.com. She's also very active on Instagram, and it's Tara-Nicholle Kirke on Instagram, right?
Tara-Nicholle Kirke on Instagram.
And there will be links to everything in the show notes. Is there anything specific you want to send people to that you're doing right now, or that's on your website? Any resource?
Let's see. You know what? Yes, actually, my newsletter, Transformation Tuesday, and it's just at soultour.com/sign up. But it's kind of how we like keep you up to date on everything else that we're doing. Yes. And it's the best thing I do. It's the free thing I do, and it's the best thing I do.
Love that.
I love that newsletter. I write it actually during my own meditative practices. So it's literally, usually I'm typing it out of my journal into the newsletter. And
I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, everyone. Get some more Tara in your life.
I'd love to be there.
We're like planning trips and stuff. We're like, okay, can we stop recording so we can talk about everything else we wanted to talk about as well? All right. This is great. I'm so glad you were here. I hope everyone got the good nuggets and even just your energy. Like, I hope they can really feel how you live this and the impact of everything you shared, how it has on your life. Like you are, how you are because of all these things that you do.
It's actually very delicious.
Yes.
So then, and it's habit forming in that way. Like,
yeah, it's great. So I hope everyone gets to find their own inner lavishness and deliciousness because they listen to this. All right. I'm like, this is when I don't want the interview to end. And I'm like, just keep saying things, but we got to go.
Thanks for having me, sweetheart.
We'll see you later.